Hello, this is Dr. Regino, and I'm from Victor Valley College. Welcome to this audio slide presentation, Designing Successful Faculty Training for Online Teaching, Part 2. And what I wanted to do was kind of continue our discussion. If you were at the last OTC last year about this time, I did give the same, more or less, presentation, but I wanted to continue the discussion and also update some of the information as far as the new research and other items on this particular presentation. So let's get started. Okay, so these are our topics for discussion today. I want to talk about some conflicting views as the research as of last year has brought out between faculty and what they think about or what they perceive about as far as online learning is. And there's a kind of good comparison we'll take a look at between faculty and administrators. Also, from last time we did discuss the basic learning theories, which I think are very important when we talk about online teaching, and these are the theories that underlie the practice. Also, we have some research into the best practices of online teaching and learning, and that popular item, the MOOCs, right? MOOCs are still going on these days, as you all well know, and I want to talk about that as well as define it, and also talk about some of the newer things that have transpired since we last talked, and also strategies in development, faculty development for teaching online. We'll end with that. And that is really sort of our focus as far as what I hope you can come away with, some good ideas for potential faculty development at your college. Okay, first of all, let's talk about some of the latest research. This is according to the Babson Survey Research Group. They teamed up with Inside Higher Ed to do this study, completed it as of last year. And I'm not going to go through the whole study. Obviously, it's quite quite detailed. I have a reference at the bottom there, though you could look up online very easily. But basically, what they found out in a nutshell is that when faculty were surveyed, and this is about 4,500 faculty across the country in different types of schools, two-year colleges, all higher ed, by the way, two-year colleges, four-year universities, private for-profit, and private non-profit. What they found out was that faculty were more pessimistic than optimistic about online learning. However, they found out that the academic technology administrators were more optimistic, and that's pretty interesting right there. Basically, what we can deduce from that is faculty still have a lot of issues with online learning and its effectiveness, whereas the technology administrators, and we're talking about directors of distance ed, people of that nature, they are optimistic about it. So as you can see by the graph right there, this is the case. Okay. When they looked at the responses on the survey from the academic officers, right, the chief academic officers, about 1/3 of them considered online learning outcomes inferior, or somewhat inferior to face-to-face. There's that kind of broad range there. However, faculty, nearly 2/3, said basically the same thing. So as we can see, that graphing of inferior or somewhat inferior was more broadly based as far as the decision with faculty, as opposed to the ones who basically call the shots, right? The CAOs. So there's a difference in how they perceive the effectiveness of online learning. Okay, in this slide, we further the point that faculty with direct online teaching experience have more positive views than of online learning than those who don't, and that's pretty obvious because those faculty, obviously, who have some experience teaching online. They are more positive about online learning, right, than those who have never taught online, frankly speaking. And I think that's pretty obvious in most of our experience. Maybe in your experience too, before you taught online, you may have had a lot of questions about it, weren't really sure, but this survey out of all this faculty, and by the way, sorry I failed to mention the administrators, by the way, that were polled. There's about 600 of them across country, and again, from all these different types of institutions. But I think this is a good survey. It just shows where we are currently with the perception of online learning effectiveness. Now, in this next slide here, and on this graph, we can see that there's a negative pattern about online education. This shows how the online education improves when faculty is asked on the potential of online learning to help students. And those that agree to strongly agree equal 38% in this slide. So this negative pattern, sort of with faculty anyway, just shows that that there's still a lot of question about online learning, even amongst those in our ranks. Now, paradoxically, here, as we can see in this slide, nearly half of the faculty who consider online courses inferior to face-to-face would still recommend them. There's a question in the survey that asked faculty, well, would you still recommend, or how many of you would recommend online courses even though you're maybe not in favor of them as much? And by the survey, it was shown that nearly half of them would still recommend them. So I guess you can take from that even though they may have some question about the effectiveness of online learning, faculty would still promote online courses to students. They must see, obviously, that this is the way of the future, and maybe not all teachers are obviously good teachers in all online teachers in their minds, but obviously there are some good ones that they would recommend. So by this, we can see in conclusion that although administrators consider online courses critical to growth, in other words, growth of the institution in its capacity, they are considered, or concerned, I should say, about quality. And this is really where we are at today with online teaching and learning in higher ed. We know that there are a way to grow the college, grow the institution with more FTEs. We know about that. However, we're just not so happy, or we're kind of concerned about the quality of the courses, because obviously, as you all know, probably in your institutions, the completion rates are still rather low. Retention has improved, as many of you know, over the years, but the completion rates in online class are still pretty dismal. I know at our college they run about 60%. So, there's a real question there about the quality, not only of the course, but really too about the quality of how it's being taught as well. And although there's a vacuum of information about faculty's perception of online learning, the point is that they remain cautiously optimistic, and that's faculty, that online courses will somehow improve. And I don't know about you, but I think even though I'm an administrator currently, I put on my teacher hat, right now, I would say that there is some hope. Obviously, the new way, so to speak, these days is to teach with technology, and we're improving all the time using new tools, using new techniques, and there's some really good work going out there, as you very well know, and there's a hope that these courses will improve. Okay, let's take a look at the basic learning theories underlying online teaching. I think these are all very important, and as it noted here, it's all learner-centered. Many of you know or have heard of Malcolm Knowles. He studied adult learning in the 50s, focused on the adult education process here in this country, and made a distinction as he wrote about his findings in that there was a definite difference in how adults learn, and he coined the word andragogy, versus the way children learn, and that's, as we all know, pedagogy. And the idea about adults in their way of learning is they bring a lot to the table. And these are the kinds of things here that Knowles actually, was able to realize in his study of the adult learner. And just to go down through the list here, they obviously have some concept, more mature. They bring experience to the table, and they use that experience as a resource for learning, as a basis for learning. They're ready to learn. They take an active approach to learning, right? They're oriented to learn. They apply immediately what is learned to the problem they may have. For example, if they were learning some accounting principle, maybe in an evening class, if they're doing accounting during the day, they can apply it the next day. Adults, as you know, are very well like that. They want to apply their learning as soon as possible. And adults have a lot of motivation and intense desire which motivates learning. So in much of my research and reading on online teaching and learning, they really take all these concepts of Knowles' assumptions of adult learning as the basis for teaching the online student. The online student has all these particular characteristics, or should have them, as Knowles has pointed out. Another theory that backs up a lot of what we do online as far as teaching and learning is this theory of constructivism. And many of you know this already. It's the way we approach knowledge and how we gain knowledge. And as you know, constructing knowledge in the constructivist approach, or theory I should say, is one that says that knowledge is built upon previous knowledge. So you have a sort of scaffolding effect, right? And that's really how one learns in our society, basically. And this is versus the way that knowledge is typically, I guess, if you will, disseminated in a traditional class in which the lecture approach is used, where students, are supposed to receive knowledge, but basically it's not as effective as constructing knowledge, and you passively receive it in that model. This also says, or constructivism also says, that the transmission modes of education, like lecture actually, doesn't address any kind of misconceptions that one may have in learning. In other words, there's no time to interrupt the professor, right, in the middle of his lecture at UC Berkeley, to be in a class like that, large lecture hall, to try to converse or try to check your misconceptions with the right idea. There's no way to do that in that kind of approach. But in constructivism, you are building knowledge, so there's a time to deliberate over beliefs, etc., and new knowledge. So this is basically what constructivism is. It's really the effective approach in learning. Now, some of you may know about Mary Ellen Weimer in 2002 in a seminal book, I believe, called Learner-Centered Teaching. She gave 5 key changes, in practicing the learner-centered classroom environment. And you look at these, basically, I'll point to the adult learner, by the way, if you can really kind of see the underlying implications here. But the learner-centered classroom has all these characteristics, right? There's student equality, the power in the classroom is not just with the instructor, but also with the student. The function of the content is really to learn. It's not just just kind of a raw knowledge type of situation, but you are gaining skills as you learn the content. The role of the teacher, by the way, as you probably heard before, is not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. So the teacher has to have more of a facilitative role in the learner-centered classroom. And of course, the responsibility for learning really points back to the student. The student has to accept that responsibility, that it's their class. They have the responsibility to learn, and if they're not learning, it's not totally the teacher's fault, right? The student has to accept that responsibility. And then the purpose for evaluation is that it promotes learning from one level of subject matter to the next, right? It's not just to get a grade, as we all have our experience, you know, in our own learning prior. So anyway, this focus on learner-centered teaching is really critical if we're going to talk about what is the underlying theories behind online teaching and learning. Okay, so what we've seen is that the basic theories underlying online teaching is understanding that the learner is an adult, so adult learning theory applies. Knowing that the learner in an online learning environment is constructing his or her knowledge based on the activities in the online course, obviously, and that we have here is a learner-centered environment where the learner really is the key person in online teaching and learning. They are where everything happens, basically. As instructors, we can only design the course, have the materials there, but really a lot of the learning will take place based on how the student interacts in the online class. Okay, let's take a look at some best practices in online teaching and learning. And all that we're discussing here is all going to give us a really good picture, I believe, of how we need to mold and design our faculty development. Okay, here's some observations I've noticed about some best practices, and that is that business education is driven by technology innovations. In other words, the more we advance in distance ed is very correlative to the technology that's out there. As you know, in the beginning, when we had discussion boards, they were mainly discussion boards with mainly text, and they were asynchronous, and I enjoyed them. I mean, as a teacher, they were good. But nowadays, we have some of you know about voice threading. Now you don't just have the text in a discussion situation, but you can have sound and also video with it all together. So technology has now given us more ways to adapt to different teaching styles, right? So technology is really driving the way we teach. And there's a wealth of innovative technology tools being discussed and utilized. I mean, nowadays, besides wikis and blogs, which I think are a little bit older, now we're talking about tweets, right? Posts on Facebook, things of that nature. So I think as an online instructor, you have more tools that are available to you, right? And the interesting thing about what I noticed in the field today is that even though we have a lot of this technology that's available and even training for it, faculty still is skeptical. We don't have hordes of faculty jumping into online teaching. I think, and I know this not just from my own experience, but also from the literature, and many faculty see online teaching as a lot more work, and it is, frankly speaking. So obviously they're not running, hordes of them not running to teach online, but obviously when they do, we who are the practitioners want to make sure that they know what they're doing. And up till now, I think the best practices really seem to be pretty well standardized now. I mean, we have now INACOL standards, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we have standards of design, standards of teaching, and these seem to be what's driving the best practices, right? However, what I noticed in my studies my observations on best practices is that a lot of faculty still are asking for more understanding of online pedagogy or andragogy, we should say here. There's not a whole lot of emphasis on that. I'm not quite sure why that's not out there. I know the emphasis is on learning the tools of technology, but in my view, the tools are just tools. You still need to know how and why you're using the tools. And that's where the andragogy or pedagogy comes in for online teaching and learning. So you have to know the basis of why you're using that particular tool. And that's what we did talk about, the adult learner and all the characteristics of the adult learner. Okay, so here's key elements of a good online course. And many sites you'll find online, many of the organizations out there, the institutions out there in which faculty are trained, they'll say the basic elements or the key elements of a good online course can be defined in 3 areas. Number 1, it's got to be quality course design. For example, Quality Matters, Mr. Maryland Online rubric that they use to have a good, well-designed course. And a good online course also has quality performance from the instructor. In other words, the instructor knows what he or she is doing. They're using best practices from what works, in others' experiences, what they've learned, and what works best for them. And then thirdly, if you have adequate support services, that is technology support at your institution, you'll have good online an online teaching experience. So you need all these 3, obviously. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Quality Matters rubric. And here is what the rubric entails. It has a set of 8 general standards and 41 specific ones. And these are used to evaluate the design of the course. So if you are going to use the Quality Matters rubric, and we're not going to get fully into it, I think it's obviously a rubric and a way to standardize your courses in the way you teach. And you really should look into that. By the way, I think it's a really a good way to gauge whether what you're doing is really is really on par or not. The Quality Matters rubric also explains the application of the standards, the relationship among them, and it has a scoring system and a set of online tools that facilitate evaluation by a team of reviewers. So if you get into that system, obviously there's going to be reviewers to review your particular course and the way it's being taught. And here's the rubric here, 8 general standards, as you can see here. Course overview and an introduction, learning objectives, assessment, instructional materials, learner interaction, course technology, learner support, and accessibility. And I think we all know that according to Quality Matters, at least with this rubric, it really covers the basic design of the course, right? So if you have all these going on, you have a good class. It's really not a mystery these days, right? Now here are some basic principles that I know I've noticed through my years of teaching online and also through my research. And I highlighted them sort of in red here and on this slide. This is taken from Diane Howard. And I think good, effective facilitation of online courses for online learners has all these, and that is a good moderator, that's an instructor, right? You have a learning community, you promote a learning community among yourself and the students. Your distance education is interactive. You have a class that's very interactive between you and the student, between the students themselves, even the students with the material. You interact, right? The goal should include facilitating the higher level thinking skills, right? Analysis, synthesis, right? Bloom's taxonomy. And effective strategies include requiring posting of biographies. That's always a good thing to do. And by the way, I think anyway, students are interested in you as the instructor, what your background is, where you're coming from, and I know I do, or I did when I went to school, and I wanted to know about my online instructors and where they were from and what their background, even their hobbies, things like that. It's not bad, but to really create that type of personal relationship between you and your students in the online environment. Interactivity projects, collaboration, participation, these are all types of strategies that are good in online classes. And of course, the syllabus is very important, as you probably all know, in dealing with online teaching, and all your goals, your objectives, etc., right, as the list here says, need to all be spelled out. And even as on ground, as you know, your syllabus is your contract with your student, and even more so in the online environment. Your syllabus really needs to spell things out very explicitly as much as possible. Duplication, redundancy, as you've probably heard before, is not a no-no. In other words, it's okay. You can be redundant. You can have those policies in your syllabus, those procedures there. And if you have to reiterate them again through a posting, an announcement, that's quite all right. That's also a best practice as well. Okay, so in conclusion, as far as best practices are concerned, whatever is practiced and utilized should be based upon, obviously, the underlying online theory or learning theories of online teaching, and the key elements of courses, as we just of good online courses we just went through, and especially quality instructor performance. So at this point, we have to ask ourselves, how do we maximize instructor performance, right? So here's where a good faculty development program comes in. And before we fully get into that, let's talk about MOOCs for a second. And I bring this topic up again in this presentation because MOOCs are here. Not quite sure if they're here to stay, but it sure looks like it. People are investing quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time into it, and it seems still to be on a fairly high trajectory, right? So let's talk about the MOOCs, because that obviously will, I think, maybe not now, but it will affect the way we and my audience, I believe, are the community college folks, most of you, it will affect the way we design our faculty development. So let's talk first of all about what MOOCs are. Some of you may know this, and this is kind of a review maybe, but they're the massive open online courses. They're taught by actually usually fairly well known or university type professors, and it's open to the public. You have third-party private companies. We'll go through those in just a second here. These third-party private companies are really the platform in which these MOOCs are developed and housed. They are usually focused on short video lectures. They have interactive quizzes, for some feedback, and they're given, as actually I mentioned this a second ago, given by professors from high-quality institutions typically. And that's what started the MOOC movement here, actually some professors from Stanford. Now, these are the folks involved. Okay, Coursera, you have Daphne Koller, Andrew Ng are the founders for Stanford. And by the way, they've asked a former, I just read it just the other day, former president of Stanford to be the president of the Coursera company. So they're obviously open to that. Udacity is another MOOC company from Stanford. Same school as Daphne and Andrew, but they're computer science folks, Daphne and Andrew, and Sebastian and Peter Norvig are in another department, though related, more into the engineering, I believe. Then you have edX at Harvard and MIT, and you have Anant Argwal and Alan Garber, Michael Smith. Now, last year, if you remember, if you were with me in this discussion last year, we only had the first two lines here, and you can see that from October 12th, right, when the MOOCs started, they started with a bang, obviously, and right away they had so many courses and partners, etc. But look at the trajectory. I mean, in 1 year, they went from 43 courses to 388. These are courses that were developed with all the faculty that were involved at the different institutions, right? And their partners, meaning other institutions that came to Coursera and wanted to partner with them to develop the courses. And look what happened with students. I mean, they had 640,000 off the bat when they first started. Now that's grown to 7.1 million, and that's just phenomenal growth in just not even quite 2 years yet, right? And the countries have been pretty consistent. They're in 190 countries. Well, they were back in 2012. Now they're in 196. So that's not as much growth, but right off the bat they were going everywhere. So okay, so here's an interesting piece of information that I looked up that looks like it's kind of a concern at this point with MOOCs, and that is a survey again from the Babson Group. They found out that there's less support for MOOCs as a sustainable method of course offerings. Okay, and 46% in 2012 thought that, right? And now it's gone down a number of percentage points to 39%. And these are folks who neither agree or disagree that MOOCs are sustainable methods. So that percentage has gone down. So that kind of gray area of people who are really not, I don't know if it's being comfortable or not sure that we're going to be able to sustain the MOOCs for the long term, right? So it's a kind of a, you got to think about it, right? The percentage has gone down, and that's, I think, percentage-wise, that is something to think about. Why that's happening. Here's what we've learned so far from MOOCs. These are quotes actually from people who have dealt with MOOCs these last couple of years. It's personalized curriculum. One size does not fit all. Students need to practice with the material, obviously. Every student needs to engage in the material. This ability to interact actively with the material is essential to student learning. Peer grading is a surprisingly effective strategy. These are things that they found out with the MOOCers or MOOCers, or however you want to call that. And then lastly here, a global community is formed around a shared intellectual endeavor. And I just have to admit to you that a lot of these things that they're finding out at the, I guess, university level dealing with MOOCs, we at the community college level kind of understood that in our history of teaching online. But this is great that is happening at the university level, because we know that their offerings have not been as robust. Only in the last few years have the universities and foreign institutions really have gone into the online teaching and learning arena. Here's other things that I've noticed, and I want to highlight. There's a couple of these that are highlighted, and we'll kind of talk about them in a second. First of all, peer grading and even self-grading are correlative to instructor grading. In other words, this came from a study done by Sadler and Good, as you can see the reference at the bottom of the slide, in 2006. And what they found out was that in a MOOC format, if you let the peers kind of grade each other in that type of interaction, the grading that they would give their peers, in other words, other students in the class, is really pretty close or pretty synonymous with what the instructor would grade. So that's really interesting. That has a lot of implication on the way students interact in the class, right? We can trust, in other words, how they interact, and even know that they're learning from each other, know that they are good judges on who is learning what. So that's a really interesting realization. Then the second point here, in a large community of learners, students are able to interact with each other on a deeper level. And we know that from teaching online for many of us in the community college, obviously, for years, that there is a deeper level of learning in an online classroom. Students form themselves into study groups. Okay, and this is what's happening with the MOOCs. There's so many thousands of people in these large courses, and eventually they do form groups, and they do meet with each other. They meet at a local restaurant, coffee shop. They get together and form study groups. We have to remember that MOOCs are still classes, right? People may not finish them or do all the tests, etc., but there are some serious folks out there who actually do complete the course, and they do it with many times with help in these small groups. Now this next point here I think is interesting. Data is being collected to form data-driven rather than hypothetical theories on human learning. So because in these MOOCs, because they're getting definite types of information in the way that people are navigating through them, in the way they're answering questions on quizzes and tests, etc., what the universities are doing here is they're collecting all this information and they're putting it together in a format that reveals how students are learning through the MOOC. So I think that is really interesting because now it's data-driven. Their knowledge is data-driven rather than just maybe, if you could say, anecdotal as far as how a person is learning in a class or how he or she is becoming successful. And I think this lends itself to really a lot of thinking on our parts as educators. In these large thousands, hundreds of thousands even, in some courses, we can get some pretty good data, right, on how all these students are learning in the course. It's a large sample pool that we're getting. So I think that this is really, groundbreaking in the sense that we can really begin to use this kind of data to improve teaching. So anyway, you should think about that. And obviously the lecture format needs to change into active learning in the classroom. We all understand that as online teachers. Okay, here are critiques by both faculty and administration about MOOCs. They're face-to-face interactions. Lectures are, by the way, and some people think, hey, you can't just forget about the face-to-face lecture. That's really important. Public lectures will never replace online ones. True. The quality of live student interactions is not the same online. That's true. Teaching, humanities is inherently against, and they're skeptical of online teaching. Humanities is more of a very interactive type of subject anyway. I guess if you want to talk about Shakespeare, it's probably nice to have the teacher in front of you. That's how I took Shakespeare, by the way. But I guess the folks in humanities feel that that's the case. Certain seminar classes best taught discussion-based, true, and online discussion forum is very different from an on-ground one, true. I know I have a political science professor here at the college who has a live, asynchronous through CC Confer, a chat with his online students. Feedback from students is not as insightful, right, from the students to to one another as a highly skilled professor, and that's pretty obvious. So, you know, in a MOOC where there's hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands of students, it's hard for a professor to give feedback to one particular student. We all know that. Writing instructors' line of feedback is not possible in a large MOOC. That's probably true, right? Especially in the English class, if you have over 100,000 students in the same English class, I don't think the instructor can grade every single paper. They're obviously not. Construct knowledge, not just consume it. This is another critique. And undergraduate experience is irreplaceable by technology. What they're talking about there obviously is the university experience on ground rather than taking your university fully online. You miss that, you know, that college experience with your peers. Okay, here's some other observations here. There are good characteristics or some characteristics of good online courses that we see with MOOCs. We see it's mostly driven by technology, obviously. Started by technological advancement by having courses open to the world, basically. And the private for nonprofits are getting involved, by the way, and they have their say about where the MOOCs are going. As far as their effectiveness, the jury's still out, I think. But as we all know, those who are in the MOOC business are pretty excited about what they're doing, and they are, I think, for a greater part, changing the way the world is getting educated. Right? You have free classes from the top universities in this country, right? MIT, Stanford. I mean, what more can you ask as far as quality education? So they have the potential to change, obviously, the change of delivery of higher ed. But as we all look at the mass, that's what they call it, mass of open online courses, because there's a lot of people in the course, so one must always ask about quality and retention in the course. And there's different ways of looking at that, obviously. But if you have 23,000 who complete the course where 100,000 were in the course, you know, some will say, hey, that's still a success because 23,000 completed, right? Even though there was 100,000. But I think as we continue to experiment with the MOOCs, we'll really get to know more about the quality, and I think what they're doing, the universities, and doing with doing with the research on MOOCs will help with understanding more about how to teach in a qualitative way. Okay, now let's go in the last few minutes here about some strategies for faculty development in online teaching. And I just want to spend a little bit more time on this slide here. What we need to do, I believe, is to create a culture of staff development within our institutions. And if you don't have that yet, I think that's something we all need to be working on. And I think we all need to have a college resource page. I think many of the colleges do. We put our, here at Victor Valley, we put our policies. We've passed through the academic senate, such as regular effective contact, authentication, all these kinds of different policies we pass. We put it on there for everyone to see, to understand, and to learn from. And we have a good faculty-driven DE and the staff development committee. So we're concerned with staff development here, and we have a committee that meets on it regularly to basically plan our different staff development activities. And your administrative support is crucial because obviously they fund all these activities. And as another strategy here, promote faculty development networking, and I know that goes on at our conferences as this one, the OTC, but I think some academies that are created are excellent too. And something that we're looking at here, and we've started to develop that in part, in our region, and that is a training consortium that's made up not just with faculty and practitioners and administrators from our college, but also from nearby colleges who are interested in developing good professional development for online teaching and learning. And here's a slide of what we're doing in our area. At Mount San Jacinto, they have 3 days of faculty development. They get into effective practices. They talk about Blackboard tools and teaching strategies and other types of professional development. And we at Victor Valley have followed suit. A few years ago, we went to their faculty development academy, and we realized we need to have one as well. So what we've done is we've devised a one-day faculty development, and we hired one to come and give it. And as I heard, by the way, just because we're talking about one, they are developing a shorter type of training. I think it's about 8 weeks rather than their longer, almost 6-month certification process at this point. Anyway, we'll get to that in just in a second here. Victor Valley, we have faculty workshops we hold sometimes every other week or every 3 weeks. And we've done in fact, we just finished a academy where we had Blackboard come and support us with training. They sent their trainers over. And I think if you talk with the Blackboard folks, if you use Blackboard at your institution, they'd be very interested in coming and supporting your faculty training. And what we've done with MSJC, since we go down there, we've invited them up here, so we have a reciprocal type of training going on. And I think if you have colleges, especially that are within proximity to each other, that's very, very easy to be done, and you share expertise, right, between your institutions. You do conferences. That's another development strategy, faculty development strategy, and obviously the one that we're at here as you hear this this taped broadcast, right, is going on probably as you hear this or read it, hear and read. And you have also a lot of online courses you can take online. Many of you know this already, but here's just some examples here. The Learn folks, AI, the academic impressions, are all sending me a lot of webcasts, and some of these are free, by the way. You can attend. Really, really interesting, and the PBS Teacher Line, and Edudemic is another one. So, and that's a free one too. So there's a lot of stuff you can get on the internet as far as free faculty development that's out there just for your personal use. Now I want to go through real quick 3 faculty development strategies here as far as certifications. There's COAT, Certificate for Online Adjunct Teaching, and that's Maryland Online. As you know, it's Quality Matters. And here are their competencies that you will go through if you take their certificate. If you go to Sloan C Online, okay, which there, as you know, Sloan does a lot of the research for online teaching and learning in this country. They're the ones that I mentioned in the survey from the Babson group at the beginning of our discussion. Their certificate is for a 9-week foundation course on 3 electives. You can take it without the electives. It's a little cheaper, but they'll give you the 3 electives in their system that will cost you $18.49. You've got to have a couple of prerequisites, right? Either a class you've already taught or you've already taken, and you have to develop an online course or use that as one that you will revise. And you will take 3 additional electives, and the objectives for that certificate is to become highly effective in the principles and practices of asynchronous instruction. It's to integrate Sloan C's theoretical foundations to online teaching and learning. And as innovator of online instruction, you're supposed to create high quality work and work products assessed by their program facilitators and peers. Okay, and here's their Sloan C Online Teaching Certificate in more detail. This is what you learned in the 9 weeks, all listed here. Okay. And here's at 1. So the last one I have is an example. And I'm going to say this to those of you who are listening to this broadcast. You may be involved in the California OEI, Online Education Initiative. And as we all kind of hear rumblings of how they're going to roll that out, one of the things they want to do is provide a certification, I think some of you have heard, with standards involved. And the standards are what they call INACOL standards from K through 12 that has been established nationwide in this country. They've been adopted by at 1, and they've used those INACOL standards in their certification process this last few years, and they want to roll out their 5 courses and practicum here into a smaller, as I mentioned earlier, a smaller 8-week type course, especially with OEI coming. So I think we all need to look at that if we're not already certified. And if we don't know about the standards, we need to look into that. I think they really give us a good way to qualify and improve, in many cases, our online courses. So I think this is a good way to do it, and it will be rolling out soon. So at the end of what have we understood here in our discussion, although it's only me discussing, right, and you kind of receiving my talk here, but there's a teaching paradigm shift, obviously. We can't consider ourselves good online teachers if we haven't had training, right? And training should be based on proven theories that the practitioners and those who have gone before us in the online teaching world and have researched all adhere to. And the theories that we mentioned earlier about adult learning and etc. Colleges should focus on staff development for online teaching. This is something we need to be focused on. I think a lot of colleges have not really developed a good staff development yet. And then faculty who need to teach online need to professionalize their training. In other words, as I mentioned at the end there, we need to have certification processes, and we mentioned a couple of examples there. So these are some strategies here. The way you obviously do them at your own institution will vary from one another, but I think from our discussion today, you'll see there's a really good basis for doing so. And we'll end here. And please, if you have any questions on my discussion here, please email me, and I'm going to put my email into the system here. You may see it here coming up. It's on the bottom of the screen, should be there, and that's my email at bbc.edu. If you have any questions there, please feel free to contact me, and we can discuss further. I know there's a lot of still unanswered questions, and we're still developing our field in online teaching and learning. So thank you for listening, and I hope to see you on ground and at the OTC.